You can talk about freshman prospects, you can talk about returning prospects, but everyone knows that the quality of an NBA draft class is measured by the influx of international talent. That's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm Stephen Gillaspie. That's my co-host on the far right over there, Jam Hines. Jam, how we feeling?
Wonderful. We have a special guest here today talking international prospects, international system, and the Niners are 3-0 today, pulling it out. Eddie Pinheiro. I love it. So I'm great today.
And the Rams lost. Let's rock. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. The Draft Sickos are back. I'm your host, Stephen Gillaspie. My co-host, Jam Hines, is rocking with me. And the man in the middle that we have is our very own international Mr. Worldwide, Mr.
Let's go.
What, 305? Would build him up. He's like our very own pit bull. Here we go. All right, Ignacio Rissotto. Ignacio, how we doing, man?
Yeah, and both me and Pitbull are bald Latinos, so we kind of have like an unspoken brotherhood. So, yeah, no, just excited to be here. I think this is my third season with No Ceilings. I think this is my first or second live show. So it's exciting as it is nerve-wracking for me. So hope everything goes well.
Everything is going to go perfect. All right. So today, as everyone knows, you've seen the thumbnail. You heard me bring it on in the cold open. The International Prospect Preview Show is here. But Jam, everyone knows we got to, especially with the guest in the house, we got to make sure that the house is kept real nice and tidy. Yep. So Jam, can you hit the people with some housekeeping?
Absolutely. Can't have company with a dirty house.
That's right. Mama be mad.
Real upset. So on NoCeilingsNBA.com, I actually have an article out on the scouts take Magoon Guav's potential lottery rise, the high ceiling San Diego State big man who I do like a lot. Maxwell has his no stone unturned. The guards, that edition is back. He continues to do absolutely terrific work with that series. And Metcalf, new man on campus with Caleb Wilson, another high upside, toolsy big man that's heading to UNC that'll be one to watch. And over on the Locked On NBA Draft podcast feed with No Ceilings, Rucker and Metcalf have the top centers and also a Ben Sturt scout. And Nathan and Maxwell, they discuss Maxwell's no stones unturned, the guards. And then finally, Albert and Corey released scouts on Braylon Mullins, one of the best shooters in the class, and Chris Sinak, another high upside big in this class. And finally, on the No Ceilings NBA YouTube podcast feed, Rucker and Metcalf previewed the Big 12 conference, which has another year for the Big 12 that has another just loaded field in that Big 12 of prospects. So check all those out.
All right. Thank you very much. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Thanks for the open there, Jam. Ignacio, I hope the house is clean enough for you because we're going to pick your brain, dude. Like Jam and I, we're going to set the table. We're going to let you cook though, man. Before we get talking about prospects in particular, very specific prospects, we have a fun slate of names that we're going to be discussing. Jam, I'm going to turn it over to you because you had some really interesting questions that you wanted to ask Ignacio with his area of expertise being like these international clubs, the way that these prospects develop and how they even get over to the NBA.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really want to just give the floor to Ignacio and kind of just lay out the prompt here. Essentially, the international development prospect system is different than the American one, just to kind of do this concisely with the American system. Essentially, with Americans, top young players, usually growing up, you kind of play in your neighborhood, recreation centers for a lot of the places, schools, and then you matriculate to playing the AAU and the clubs and those type of things. And then you get to your high schools and you have prep schools if you want to go that route, and then college and those type of things. You're also seeing a growing number of academies pop up in the States as well, too. So just on the international side, what does that look like if you are a young prospect I guess maybe 8, 9, 10 young. What does that kind of process look like for you if you want to be serious about basketball?
I think it definitely looks different between different countries. I would say most of the world, high school and college are completely separated from sports, or mostly separated from high level sports. That's including basketball. And for most of the countries, especially those countries that consistently send prospects to the NCAA and the NBA, it looks very similar to the soccer model. The soccer model is where you have your top teams in your top divisions, and there's your top professional teams in top divisions. There's promotion and relegation. This is very important for a ton of effects that it has on player development and the ability of players to get, or pretty much not to get, to the pro level a lot of times. And those professional teams, whether they are first, second, third divisions, they have their own academies. They have their own, in Spain, they call it canteras. They call it different names around the world, but it's basically every pro team has their U18 team, their U16 team, their U14 team. In right where I'm at in Uruguay, it goes down to under 11. In Spain, I think some teams have under 9 teams, even some of the top teams. And so those players kind of develop within those youth systems of those teams, and they start moving up the ranks. The difference, and that's why I brought up promotion and relegation, is that when your team is the one of the bottom 1 or 2 teams in the division, you're going to be relegated to the second division. There's no prize at the end of the season. There's no draft. And the fact that there's no draft makes it so that teams don't really have anything to gain by playing young players. They need to play the players that give them the best chance to win. That's why things like Alperen Şengün playing at an MVP level in Turkey at 18 years old, Luka Doncic being MVP at 17, 18 years old for Real Madrid, Wembanyama, what he did at Metro 92, which, by the way, Metro 92 doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. That's kind of the beauty and the ugliness of the international basketball scene. Those things are really impressive because it's not like they were given those spots on, let's develop a young guy, because there's nothing for those teams to gain if those young prospects don't play at a level where they can contribute to winning. So that creates kind of a door for those leagues that do have that can afford to develop prospects to get those young players. One, of course, and that's what we're seeing this year, is the NCAA. The NCAA gets players anywhere. It used to be players anywhere between 17 and 19. This year, they're getting 23-year-old players. Yep. We're going to get into that later. But the NCAA has something to gain by playing young prospects, because that's their entire talent pool. And then there's some leagues out there, like the Australian NBL has a program. They don't have promotion and relegation, and they have a program where they go out, scout, identify, and recruit young players around the world.
Stars, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And they bring them, they pay them better salaries than they are getting in their current teams, and they give them more minutes than they're getting in their current teams. The G League used to do that. Now it kind of depends on the team. You can bring international players through the international G League draft. There's actually a couple of guys that got drafted this year that are going to be draft eligible for next year, but that doesn't happen. That is also a product of being able to bring young players and not being worried about getting relegated. And I want to really focus on what getting relegated means. It doesn't mean like you're going down and you're coming back next year, for some teams it's a death sentence because they rely on the TV money of the first division, the revenue of the ticket sales, the sponsors to just survive. And some teams get relegated and never come back again, never play basketball again. So that's why, that's why it's so important to just put the best possible product on the floor at an international level. So that's what creates that reality of basketball, or professional basketball around the world, is what creates that avenue for players to go to those other leagues where they can get more minutes, where they can get paid the money that they probably deserve at a fair market value, and develop as they're playing.
That's interesting. So, Jam, I want to take that statement, and I want to ask Ignacio, with the innovation of NIL, I think that's something that we have seen. And I think, too, like a lot of people look at NIL and the influx of talents that are coming stateside now from these European clubs. Ignacio, I know it's like very in the early onsets, but in my piece that I'm working on for No Ceilings, it should be released this week, I actually have noticed that since NIL, like we have seen more players come over from these European leagues, but we still have a fair number of international players that I hate to say it this way, but like traditional international prospects, to where they are still playing like in these leagues overseas. They're still getting drafted. So do you feel like the talent is being depleted from these other clubs, or is it just kind of how you were saying earlier, it's giving more opportunities for younger players who may not get a chance to play at some of these more loaded or stacked clubs?
That's a really great question. I will say it's a bit of column A, a bit of column B. So last year we had a ton of international guys get drafted, and not only international guys that stayed overseas like Hugo Gonzalez in Real Madrid, but also guys like Yegor Demin, who was Gonzalez's teammate in Real Madrid, ended up going to BYU, or Kasparas Chakuchianis at Illinois, that were like high-level prospects. And I think when I saw those two guys committing, that was for me like, oh, okay, like this is serious. Because previously, I feel like in previous years, you had that one or two like high-level prospects, but the top prospects would always stay overseas. And believe me, top prospects historically always had offers to come to NCAA.
Sure.
I mean, Hugo Gonzalez had a $1 million offer there were several teams that offer 7 figures, and he stayed at Real Madrid for way less money, just because he wanted that experience. Like, he's been in the Real Madrid system since he's 11 years old, and also like he wanted that professional experience. I think the biggest change that I see is, where I see the biggest change being reflected, is that 3 years ago, coaches, when they would text me, like college coaches or assistant coaches, they would ask me, is this guy interested? And I always told them, that's the wrong question. The question should be, do I want this player to come to my school, and what do I need to do to get him? But of course, like, I think coaches have dealt in the past with trying to get guys and them not being eligible academically, or they being deemed as they played pro. All of these players were pros in a different sense. You would have to go to the fine letter of the contract to see like how, what percentage of professional they were, but they were basically all pros. So they didn't want to deal with that. They didn't want to deal with bringing a player and then in October realizing that they have been suspended or they are not eligible. That's out the window this year. So in a way, it gives more opportunity to players. In a way, there are players that are not going to be eligible because the NCAA will kind of put a stop to some players where they are like, no, like this guy played in the G League, we cannot let him go to college. This guy is on the next Sarr's program, he's making $100K, we cannot let him go to college. This is right now. It might change for 1 year from now. But at the same time, I look at this year's class, which is the 2007 generation is not the best generation, probably one of the weakest international generations I've seen since I'm doing this, which is since the 2000s generation. And so I think, yeah, talent is getting depleted for sure. That also creates opportunities for other players that wouldn't have been there, because in certain leagues also you need to have a minimum of X amount of players in your roster that were either developed by your team or developed by some other team in your league. Like Spain is known for that. Spain, you need to have X amount of players developed by academies in Spain. That's how Spanish teams need to keep those academies afloat, because if they don't continue to bring talent, it ends up reflecting badly on the product a few years down the line.
Okay, fair. Another point that I want to bring up, Jam, you kind of talked to us a little bit about this before we hit the live button here. Correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm phrasing this in a manner that is not true, but you were mentioning that there are people who are going to be playing college basketball this year who technically, by some legalese loophole, they might be able to actually be signed by an NBA team during the actual college season. Can you explain that a little bit, or am I off base?
No, you're definitely there, and I love loopholes. I live for gray areas, but
we need to get Pablo Torre on this. You know?
So basically, the CBA, when it deems you're an international, the NBA CBA has a whole thing about when you're eligible to be drafted, right? There's two parts: is when you can declare yourself as eligible, and then when you're automatically eligible, and after that you're an undrafted free agent. Like if you turn 22, if you're an international guy and turn 22, I'm an undrafted free agent right now. If you're an international guy and turn 22, or if you completed college or are 1 year removed out of high school, you're automatically eligible for the NBA draft. This year, we have a number of players that are born in 2003 that are going to go to college for the first time this year. So by the time born in 2003 means you were 22 years old in the year of this year's draft, 2025. And by that point, those players, if I'm reading the CBA correctly, were considered international players. To be an international player, you need to not have gone to a high school in the US, and you need to have played professionally overseas. So you have guys like Lefteris Mensoukas at Oklahoma State, one of the best shooters in Europe. He's already 22. Ron Zipper, athletic wing out of Israel, going to LSU. He's already 22. Ruben Dominguez, a really great scorer out of Spain, going to Texas A&M. He's 22. Thijs de Ridder, out of Belgium, going to Virginia. I think he's going to be 23 by the time his first college season ends. They are already undrafted free agents. They shouldn't be draft eligible because they were undrafted free agents this year. They were auto eligible. So and I know NBA teams are talking about this behind closed doors. There's a loophole where you can consider them undrafted free agents, and if they do really well in college, you could go and sign them right away. Let me give you a bit more on that. what it means is that the limitations to sign those players is not on NBA teams, is on the obligations players, the contractual obligations players have with those colleges and boosters and NIL agents. But reading the CBA, these guys have already turned 22, and I think the loophole is there for in this new era where you can be a 22-year-old freshman coming out of the international ranks, where you're an undrafted NBA free agent playing college ball.
Yeah, that's very fascinating, and I want to see how NBA teams eventually expose that loophole, like you were saying, especially for someone like I'll say Dorita, for example, because I know I'm going to see him quite a bit at UVA this season, so I'm looking forward to go seeing him in person. I wonder what that conversation will eventually look like with NBA teams and college teams if they're trying to get a player like Dorita or who's eligible like that. If it's like, hey, we really like him, he's killing it right now, he's hooping, we want him to continue to stay at college to develop, and we're going to just sign him now, he's going to stay, and then he'll come after the season. Or if it's like, hey, like we are going to pay for his NIL or whatever the situation is for multiple years or as long as he's going to be in college, what does that look like in that development? So I think there are a different amount of ways that teams can be creative as long as all parties are working to be collaborative, what's in the best interest of the player, and just really all parties, and they're in favor of this, because the college team doesn't want to get burned if the kid gets signed by an NBA team and it's like, all right, we are in January and he's out. We're getting ready for conference, play the harder conference, play the March Madness and everything, and they're leaving. And I don't think that's kind of the precedent that either one of the parties want to make. And then I think if that does happen, I think that's when the NBA may really step in and it's like, hey, if you're going to do it like this, we are really going to shut this down. As you said, the teams know about the loophole, and we'll just see how creative they can be and what type of prospects they will look to utilize for that loophole. What if it is a shooter, or if it's a project, someone that's more closer to being NBA ready. So I think it's going to be really fascinating.
Wouldn't it surprise me if the NBA already closed the loophole behind closed doors and just send the teams, hey, this is how we are. This is how we're. No, mostly like this is how we, because reading the CBA, you need to consider those players as international players to be auto eligible. So there might be some clarification of, hey, this player, and I'm just spitballing here, thinking about how they could close the loophole if they wanted to. Something like, hey, if this player commits to college the year of the draft, we're not going to consider them international and they're going to be eligible, for example. Or maybe the NBA comes out with, if it gets to that and if there's a player that NBA teams are interested in, maybe there's some communication down the line of, hey, this is how we treat these players. But from my understanding and from what I've seen and talked, there's some like, hey, let's keep an eye on these guys, because they might not even have to go to the draft. And I think for me, even in my database, if you were 2003 and you were not drafted this year, you're already an undrafted free agent. So yeah, definitely interesting to think about. I don't know if there's going to be ever like a practical use of the loophole, but for me, it's mostly, it speaks about how everything has changed and how the changes in college have led to this change in the international side of things. So that was my
initial thought, Ignacio. It was like, as you're saying that, I'm like, this is one of those things where like the innovations of college have superseded that of the NBA, which is crazy to think about, because historically thinking, we always think of the NCAA as like these like hoity-toity, like old people who will never change, like live in this hole, die in this hole type mentality. But now it feels like the way that college game has changed now with NIL, with the COVID years and stuff like that, the transfer portal being as relaxed as it is now, it feels like the NBA almost has to kind of play catch up. But one thing that I do want to ask, Ignacio, before we transition to actually talking about players, I didn't prep you for this one. I'm just going to see how quick you are on your feet here. The NBA denying, or kind of halting expansion talks stateside, but this NBA Euro League, so to speak, is looking like it's gaining a lot of steam to where it's like conversations in like 2027, 2028 might be a thing where like there are specific clubs being, I hate to use the word targeted, but I'm going to use it anyway. There's specific clubs being targeted from the NBA that they want to purchase. I know it is as quick as we can, I guess, what would be the implications of the NBA purchasing some of these, Euro clubs and what that could do to like the development of future NBA players?
It's really interesting. It's, I think, a complete different world to think about. First, you would have to, and I'm going to plead the fifth here because I have I kind of work for FIBA in the off season. So, but it's interesting to see which kind of actors would come in. Like, is FIBA coming in? Is EuroLeague coming in? Which are two separate entities. What's the relationship between the domestic leagues, like the Spanish league, the Turkish league, the Adriatic league, and this new kind of, let's call it the Super League? Like, every time something like this forms, people start to call it the Super League. Are you going to create new teams? Are you going to go to Real Madrid, Barcelona, Olympiacos, Panathinaikos, Red Star, Partizan, and say, hey, let's create EuroLeague 2.0 with maybe a draft? Like, that's also super interesting to think about. Is there going to be a draft? Is there going to be relegation? I was kind of caught by surprise by how like they want to like strike in 2027 and 2028. There's also other actors like there's money coming from Saudi Arabia and
LeBron,
in the Emirates. I think Dubai Basketball Club is playing Adriatic League this year. So there's a lot of influences coming in, and I wonder if like the NBA wanting to strike right now, it's a means to, not let the competition strike first. So also like, and to wrap it up, I think the other thing that I'm thinking about is who's the target audience, and that's, I think, going to define which teams are you. Is this NFL Europe all over again, and you're going to create teams that people in those countries have no attachment to, or are you going to like again create EuroLeague 2 with like very distinctive brands that move millions of people already, and then maybe sprinkle in some teams from certain regions of Europe where you want basketball to be developed? You can create a team in the UK. You can create a team like a. There's already teams for, of course, but are you going to create like a team with the structure to play against those giants in a place like Sweden or Finland or Norway, with the first two being really prolific at getting players to the NCAA and even the NBA level recently? Lots to think about. Lots to think about. I think for me, it's really exciting to see the NBA getting into the game globally, because I think it should make things easier. I think one thing that whenever I'm asked about development around the world, I always say it depends on the league. And it not only depends on the league, it depends on the economic stability of the country. It depends on who's running each club. And I think to bring an NBA standard to development and to how to run a professional team in Europe or anywhere else in the world, and also bring all the money that those investments could, bring in order to improve facilities, improve salaries for very talented people that are overseas. I think it's a net positive. Of course, there's going to be the naysayers and say, "What about tradition? What about teams being the owners of this league or this league?" And to that, I say, there's the imbalance of money in teams in Europe is outstanding. There's a team in the Czech Republic that has won. The last time I checked, I didn't even check the last year, but Nürnberg in the Czech Republic has won 17 straight titles. There are countries where it's like, okay, these two teams are winning the title
They're rooting
year.
for tradition. Yeah.
And so there's what I mean is there's already the disparity in money, and I just choose to see how that influx of money could make a ton of changes for the better in terms of facilities, development, salaries, and I ultimately see it as a good thing for the growth of basketball anywhere.
I mean, they've always said that basketball is a global game. You've seen what NBA has done globally, since since they've had a vested interest. I would even say dating back to the 80s and 90s, just gradually growing the game. It's just crazy to think that now we might actually see NBA Europe or whatever the case might be. The Super League sounds very fun, but that we're going to wrap up the discussion on the kind of changes that we've seen with international prospects and changes that still yet could come. And we're going to talk about some players in particular, but we're going to hit this break real quick. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. We are continuing our discussion on international prospects. We are the Draft Sickos, and we are joined by fellow No Ceilings member Ignacio here. So Ignacio, the first player that I want to run by you is, of course, we got to start with the Dookie, right? A Blue Devil. They're a wagon. They've got a lot of talent on their team. We're going to talk about Dame Sarr first, the wing forward kind of combination player. I in quotations, he's a freshman because I do that on my database now, in quotation freshman, because they have pro league experience, but they're collegiate freshmen, right? Listed at 6'8", 190 pounds, will be 20 years old in his first NBA season. Last year averaged almost 6 points per game, 2 boards, 1 assist, almost half a block, a little over 0.2 steals per game, with shooting splits of 52, 43, 56. So, Ignacio, what do we need to know about Dame Sarr coming in to this year? And how do you think that his game is going to translate to the premier basketball powerhouse in the NCAA? So
I think the first thing you need to know about Sarr is that Sarr was really good really early. He was, I think the first time I caught him, he was 15, 16 years old in a U16 Eurobasket, and he shot the lights out of the ball. And I think that was what we thought would be his calling card going into the next level, because of how well he shot it and the volume of shots he took. But as the time went on, and this is something that we're going to see with a couple of prospects, as they grow into their bodies, they can struggle with the jumper and the jumper development. I remember one guy having that similar issue was Franz Wagner, who was an outstanding shooter really early. Then he grew up 4 inches in a year. He was 6'6". He ended up being 6'10", 6'11". And the shot looked like it was lost, and then ended up kind of sort of coming around. So with Sarr, for a few years, and I think last year he started the season as one of the potential prospects that he could have been eligible last year. He started the season as one of the prospects to watch and ended up fizzling out. But from what I saw on the tape, it wasn't certainly because of his play. I think he didn't get a ton of opportunities in Barcelona, which again, one of the powerhouses of Europe.
Yes.
Really hard to crack the rotation there. You had a guy like Kasparas Jakučianis was his teammate in Barcelona's youth teams, and he didn't even see the floor for Barcelona's main team, or he might have seen very few minutes and ends up going and being a top 15 pick, if I remember correctly. So Sarr, last year, he only played about, I would say, 5 minutes per game in EuroLeague, 12 minutes per game in ACB. He didn't play every game as well. Like, he was mostly playing garbage minutes or covering for injured players as like a definitely on the end of the bench part of the rotation. So it's very difficult to kind of gain any knowledge from last year in terms of like the whole body of work. But when you watch the tape, I watched the tape for this show and for something that I'm writing for No Ceilings, and I came away really impressed and really like in on Sarr once again, like I was back when I watched him 2 or 3 years ago at that U16 tournament. I think the selling point for him is 6'8" with dribble, pass, and shoot potential. Yep. And with really good tools. I saw Sarr being like defined as like a potential 3-and-D guy. I think he can shoot. I think he can defend. But I don't think we can lose sight of what he can do with the ball. Like, I really like the vision as a passer. Not a guy that's going to be a primary, I think. And I don't think that's going to be a thing in Duke with all the talent that they're bringing this year. But he can move the ball. He can find the open man. He can run a pick and roll if you need him to. But like really reactive also when he can create an advantage or attack or exploit closeouts. Like really reactive to kick the ball out, to make a threaded pass, to hit the guy at the dunker spot. I think the question with him is not like anything when it comes to if he can create with the ball in his hands or if he can make a pass. For me, the question is the shooting for real? Because last year he shot 43% in the ACB, 44.8 overall when you consider EuroLeague, but on a really low volume, he shot only 1.1 3-point attempts per game. And the year before that, when he was playing it for the Barca youth teams, and just in different invitationals across Europe, he shot 28% on a bigger sample size. So I think that's going to be the key for him, and for him to readapt to what I think in Duke, with all the talent they have, it's going to be more of a tertiary or pretty much off-ball role. But if he adapts well, ends up being that 3-and-D guy, I think we cannot forget during the season that the ball handling and passing chops for me are definitely there. So yeah, I think the dribble, pass, shoot, 6'8" wing with athleticism archetype or selling point is a big one, and wouldn't shock me if he goes first round.
I think that he's got a contingent of people who are very big believers in him right now, just like people that I've talked to. I know that everyone at No Ceilings, our tentacles go out pretty far, and there's a lot of interest in looking and seeing how he performs. But Jam, I want to turn it over to you and ask you, with the fact that Sarr already has experience playing on stacked teams and being like kind of a cog in a machine, so to speak, what do you think about like the roster makeup, and what do you think about Dame's ability to be able to come in and like establish himself on a very loaded team with Duke?
Yeah, it's looking like, at least on paper, that he's going to have a really good chance to start at the 3 there and be in that front court with him, Cam Boozer, and Patrick Mbanga as well too. So I think that's what the front court's going to look like. And what Ignacio was just saying, like, I couldn't agree more. There's a lot of stuff with him as far as the passing ability. There is some on-ball juice. But when you go to Duke, as you're saying, you're going to have to play a role for the most part, especially when you first get there in this situation, when you have Cam leading the way and you also have Isaiah Evans, you have Caleb Foster, but there's not really another wing. We'll see what happens with Wilkins there, how much he's going to be as a freshman being relied upon to guard other wings and how they utilize Cam as a defender on wings too and bigs. But there's not that other wing that you really can look at. It's like, hey, I need them to guard the opposing best wing, or maybe I need him to switch and guard some of the point guards and that type of stuff. So I'm really curious to see what that looks like for Sarr this year. I think he's going to get a lot of those assignments and have a chance to show that he can be one of the best defenders on the Duke team that, especially under Shire, has really prioritized the defensive end and being together on that end and developing on that end. So I think that's what's going to be his role is, sliding that 3 and D. He's going to have the freedom as Shire does give his players to go do your thing. He's going to get out in transition, be able to play a little bit of pick and roll. And maybe he could end up having the ball in his hands a little bit more than we are kind of expecting, because we talk about how that situation, the point guard situation at Duke, is a little bit uncertain heading into the year. Caleb Foster is going to start out there, but it's not necessarily that facilitating type of point guard. He, more of a score first, but can play make as opposed to really set you up. Cam is going to operate, as a point forward at times too. And then, of course, Caden, who we're all expecting to play a significant role as point guard too. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Sarr really just slides in there, supports at a secondary, tertiary handler, and score while operating as a 3 and D player.
And Himenia has some really good feel too.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see how much run that he has. But Ignacio, for Dame, do you think that he has the type of game that can translate pretty easily with Duke? Because in my opinion, even if he's kind of, given a space on be a floor spacer on offense and be an involved defender, I think that's still going to be a role that NBA teams are going to want to see for themselves too whenever he does make it up to the league.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the transitions that he will have to make, one of the how he adapts the game. And I think that's something that happens with, I think, all international and all top level high school prospects. You spend your entire career being the guy in your youth teams, and then when you get to the professional level, when you get to the college level, you have to adapt because there's other top freshmen, there's returners, there's transfers, there's a lot of high level guys. I think the fact that he played in Barcelona and how he was able to, even in limited minutes, just make an impact this season around the stacked roster, because again, there was not a single minute he played this year for Barcelona where he wasn't the most raw or the least offensively polished player on the floor, just because of, in terms of age and in terms of how much experience he has.
Yeah.
Even with the second unit, even with the third unit, it's just a matter of again, age and experience. So the fact that he has an entire year of him practicing in that role and playing in that role, even if he was, I think it was about, I would say it's about 180 minutes or something like that the entire year. So I think the experience in having done that the entirety of last season for Barcelona, it's going to come in handy. And if he can thrive in that role for Duke this year, even if he doesn't get a ton of room to do things on the ball, I think NBA teams, just because of the size and the ability to make an impact on both ends of the floor without the ball in his hands, NBA teams will be interested. But it's a matter of him just buying into that role and transitioning into that role. Again, with all the guys you mentioned, with Caleb Foster, Caden Boozer, Cam Boozer, I don't think there's going to be a ton of opportunities for him to do a ton of stuff on the ball. So the sooner he buys into that role and is able to adapt to it, the better it will be both for Duke and for his draft stock.
That's totally fair.
I just want to piggyback real quick on what Ignacio said. And for me, and I think you guys may feel the same way, but when a prospect plays the role that they're going to play in the NBA in college, it just makes visualizing and projecting them so much easier. For him to play a 3-and-D role, play that second side creator at Duke, that's the exact type of role he's going to play in the NBA level. He's not going to be an on-ball guy unless he just takes this explosion. Maybe it's year 2 at Duke or something like that. But right now, the way it's laid out, he's going to be a 3-and-D guy, and that's the way that he's going to play in a college level, and that's the way more like he's going to play in the NBA level.
For sure. All right, so let's transition now from Dami Sarr playing with Duke. We're not going to travel very far in terms of universities, because next up is a player who has like a very much so a cult following, it feels like, on the IDC or the internet draft community. And Ignacio, you're here to save me with the pronunciation, but Neoklis Avdalas will be playing at Virginia Tech. I have him classified as a perimeter player, Ignacio, so a guy who you could probably, whenever he's fully grown and fleshed out physically, probably give you some minutes 1 through 3, depending on the roster construction. Another one of these freshmen, you're going to see me do that a lot. 6'9" listed. I don't have the correct weight listed here on my notes. I have 125, and I know he weighs more than 125 pounds. But also will be 20 years old on this draft, or by next season. Last year, averaged around 9 points per game, 2.5 rebounds, over 1 assist, almost a half a block, over a half a steal, with shooting splits of 45, 41, 73. Again, Ignacio, I'm going to tee it up, man. What do we need to know about Neo and how his game could translate over to the States here?
You mentioned something that for me is key, is that even if you see him listed at 6'8", 6'9", for me, he's a perimeter player through and through. Just because the first 2 things that stand out about him are the ball handling and the shooting. And the third thing is obviously the positional size. So obviously for me, not a one, not somebody that's going to defend once, and I'll get into that later. But somebody that could be your 2 guard that gets a lot of on-ball responsibilities. He doesn't have really elite quickness or explosiveness, but super fluid, has a ton of dribble moves, can create with the ball in his hands, can get by opponents by using screens, or just by, if you defend him with a college 6'3" 2 guard, he's going to overpower him just out of sheer size. And then I also he has the passing chops. He had 8 assists per game this summer at the U20s, at the U20 Eurobasket with Greece. He was the lead guy there.
And a triple-double in that event too. Yep.
Yeah, he's the guy. He can pull out that occasional advanced read, but a guy with a ton of driving kicks, consistently making the right play, consistently finding guys, creating advantages of the dribble, super consistent at that. And that for me is super exciting, because at 6'9", he could be somebody that develops into that offensive engine role, where you can have him attack off the dribble, creating out of the gravity he generates. And the shooting, he took a leap last year, shooting, like you mentioned, I think he was 41 in the Greek league. It was 35.7% when you also consider the Basketball Champions League, which is a huge leap, because he was a guy shooting 13% the year prior, 9% the year prior. Yeah. And it started to come together for him. Really good touch, really good alignment. And also a ton of those shots, the shot diet is a difficult shot. 63% of his jumpers were off the dribble last year. And he made them. Playing in a pro league, he played 26 games for Peristeri in Greece. playing 18 minutes per game, 19 minutes per game. So he played like a huge role for that team. And to be able to have those opportunities to create off the dribble and shoot off the dribble, so super important for him. I'm super excited about his long-term potential, again, because I think a 6'9" guy that can be the centerpiece of your offense, at least at the college level, for me is super exciting. I cannot like the defense. I think last year he was pretty underwhelming in that end. He struggled against physicality when he had to cover like bigger wings or forwards, and like he stays too upright. I don't know if it's a thing of like having high hips or the body type, but he struggles to like get low and stay with perimeter players. So I think he might be able to get by in college just because out of sheer size difference, but something that definitely will need to be addressed before he gets to the NBA.
That's totally fair. Jam, I want to ask you this question. You're pretty much your backyard, right? Virginia Tech, not too far, right?
Not too far. A few hours. I'll definitely be down, make a trip to Blacksburg for sure.
There you go. So let me ask you this. What do you think about the way that he plays, how he fits with what the Hokies are typically doing, right? They got a pretty plucky roster this year. They got an interesting mix of talent over there for their team. One thing that I'm skeptical of is, I don't know why, but in my head, we're talking about how the NCAA has progressed forward in a lot of ways. Sometimes I think college coaches, though, keep things like simple almost to a fault sometimes. And like, do you imagine the coaching staff being like, yeah, we're going to run the offense through the 6'9" guy instead of, our guards and stuff like that are used to American style ball? Like, do you think that might be a little bit of a rough patch for him coming in, or are you kind of just optimistic in the fact that they landed him and they know what they're looking at when they saw him playing overseas?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, Mike Young and that coaching staff know what they have, and they've seen them, especially throughout the years. And, you have someone, Ignacio eloquently stated, to pass, dribble, shoot, the positional size, the playmaking, who's going to operate on the perimeter. So, and out of the pick and roll. So I think they're going to let him go do his thing. And when you look at that Virginia Tech roster, it's like there aren't too many other guards that you really want to have the ball in their hands. I know Tyler Johnson has, and Ben Hammond both have some fans in those ceilings. So I expect them to kind of all share, but I think he's going to be the lead guy there and really anchoring that offense, pushing the pace. I'm excited about Toby Lawal, hopefully taking another leap. I think they're going to work really well together, running the floor, playing pick and roll, pick and pop as well too. And yeah, I just think that he's going to have the keys to do his thing, make mistakes. He's going to grow from those, and, to be 6'8", 6'9", and the Tech website, I believe, has him at, it had something 210, 215, somewhere along that. And that, I like that. That's long arms. He has broad shoulders. You see him really filling out, and I think that his body is going to be really projectable. I'm just curious to see how opposing teams decide to defend him. Are they going to just go ahead and put wings on him? Are they going to try to put guards? As Ignacio said, like, he'll just post them up, use that size, and make plays out of that too. But yeah, if someone who plays the pick and roll with that size, and we see Demon came in last year. So I don't want to give us too off track, but just because he popped in my mind. How do you guys view him at similar stages to someone like Demon who came in? And from my perspective, at least, you have someone who has upside as an on-ball player, but more than likely his best role is going to be as like this big wing with positional size, this connecting piece who can play pick and roll, facilitate, but he's not going to be your lead guy. And there's
the Hidu Turkoglu, right?
Exactly. Yeah, except I guess the shooting's more bankable with Hito, of course. But like I that's where I kind of trying to figure out with Neo there, and just to see if he's going to have the type of upside. Virginia Tech is going to let him rock out and do his thing to see what exactly that upside is. But on the NBA level, do you guys see him as an on-ball guy long-term? Is it just kind of playing that supportive connecting piece and then kind of stacking a lot here right now, but the mind's kind of working? But here, if he is going to be a supporting piece, that kind of leads me down the path. All right, if you're a supporting piece, are you a supporting starter? Are you that type of level? Or are you a rotational guy that comes in that's the 6th, 7th, or are you kind of 8th, 9th? So I'm just very curious how that kind of pathway could lay out for him. Do you guys like him as an on-ball guy, more off-ball, or remains to be seen?
Take it, Ignacio. You got it.
Really great comparison, by the way, with Demon, and I'll give it one more layer to that comparison. I think with Avdalas, when it looks good, it's incredible. When it looks bad, it's pull him out of the game bad. Yeah. And you kind of have like, he went to the U20 Eurobasket this summer. Of course, like different levels of talent and all. But there's games where it looks great, and then you go to the stat sheet and he's like, oh, he's 30% from the field, 20% from three with 5 turnovers. It's like it's the dangers of letting him cook, basically. And I think like BYU lived with that with Demon last year. So
he's gonna burn some things in the kitchen.
100%. Yeah. Last year I wrote about him for the draft guide when he was still when he had still kept his name in the draft. And one of the comparisons that I made was Nikola Jurisic, who's with the Atlanta Hawks, because it reminded me of him in that sense of like, if he plays off the ball, I don't think there's like much value there. But when you give him the ball, and that same thing happened with Jurisic when he was with Mega in Serbia. Jurisic played with Topic 1 year, and then I think Topic either went back to Red Star or got injured. He went back to Red Star, then he got injured. And so when he went back to Red Star, like Jurisic stepped into that on-ball role that he always had and kind of took off and ended up getting drafted. So I think at the end of the day, if you have Avdalas on your team, it's going to be for him to get the ball in his hands as much as possible. I don't think Avdalas is a one and done guy. Okay. Just because I think there's some things that he will need to iron out. But I think if you want an off-ball guy, just go and get somebody that's already good off the ball. But I just think he's one of those guys that there's not a ton of guys at 6'9" that can handle and pass and shoot the way he does. So you kind of take him as this bet of maybe we don't run our entire offense through him, but he can come off the bench and like in a Thomas Satoransky type of role that he had when he was with the Wizards. Like, he's not exactly a point guard, but he runs a ton of offense, and we don't play him with the first unit because that would mean we had to put him off the ball, and that's not his
Grievous
role.
Vasquez, another one, yeah.
Yeah, but you put him with the second unit, he creates value there, and maybe he plays 20, 22 minutes per game, and that, or maybe you play him with another lead handler, and you have creation on like both sides of the floor, like you put one guy on the left, one guy on the right, and the opposing defense won't know where the pick and roll is going to come from. And so that type of things is where he creates value. If you tried, I wouldn't understand for now, and maybe like he's showing things in practice that I'm obviously haven't seen because I don't have access to that, but nothing for me that he has shown on the basketball floor makes me think that he can be like an off-ball guy, like at least right away at the NBA or the college level.
I think it would take some push-ups as well. But All right, so we'll wrap up there on our buddy Neo. We'll leave the Matrix now, and we'll go to a player who I think probably, if I think if he would enter his name for a draft right now, he's probably going to get drafted just based on the buzz that's surrounding him from everything that we just saw from Eurobasket. But Hannes Steinbach, the German big man playing for Washington this year, I don't know why I have sophomore listed. That doesn't make sense. He's another freshman. 6'11". The weight that I found, it was kind of hard. It's always a little tricky finding good weight for international prospects, but 220 pounds is a one that I saw that I kind of believe. 20 years old this upcoming year. This past season, he averaged almost 12 points per game, almost 8 rebounds, about 1.5 assists, almost 1 full steal, over 1 block, with shooting splits of 59, 32, and 66. So, Ignacio, I'm teeing you up again, brother. What do we need to know about Hines? And I want to also just like wrap this into the question. How much of what we just saw him do over the summer with Eurobasket, how much of that do we believe is translatable to American style of play?
That's the key, I think, and that's, I think, where a ton of the hype comes from with Steinbach. Not unlike Sarr and Avdalas, Steinbach wasn't really like a top level prospect for many years. Like, he only played 6 minutes per game at the U16 Eurobasket, which is kind of the first big tournament that all prospects play in Europe. And then he didn't make his professional debut up until last season. And when he makes his professional debut, he quickly becomes a really important piece for Oliver Versberg in Germany, playing 21 minutes per game in the German league, and just being really productive in that role. For me, the thing that stands out, and he's kind of, I don't want to say he's a stretch 5, because I think the shot, I would like to see him shoot more in a high setting before calling him, but definitely has the touch, definitely has the mechanics to make me think that he can develop into a guy that can shoot like 2 or 3 3-pointers per game and make them at a 35% clip of the catch. But for me, the biggest stat line there is 62% from the field. So unlike many of this kind of like, he's not super skinny, but not like a super strong, like explosive center. Sometimes they can struggle with scoring around the basket, and he didn't have those struggles at all. Not somebody that
good touch, man, around.
It's incredible. Like, they didn't like throw him the ball on the post that much. He got the ball mostly like on, okay, here's a pass, high point this pass and score through traffic, or like get the ball in the pick and roll, or get the ball out of offensive rebounds. And like a great ability to keep control of the ball in a crowd and just solve situations in traffic and against contact. Love the hook shots, love like the turnaround shots, the floaters. Like, he has really just, I don't want to say a deep bag, like he has like good footwork, he's fluid, but has just great touch around the basket. And I think
counters to his moves too.
And also I think that can really translate to shooting at the end of the day. If you have good touch around the basket, I think it can translate to good touch in 3-pointers. So I really like him offensively. Defensively, this is where for me, like for centers, like true centers, I think I would have liked to see more production from him, especially from someone that's not in the same realm as other like 6'11" guys with short arms. He has a 7'2" wingspan. He's pretty agile. So I would have liked to see him more dominating, more like as a rim protector. But his team in Germany played a lot of like switch, not switch exactly, but like he was tasked with a lot of like show and recover, and
Yes,
he
yep.
wasn't super like quick to recover. And a ton of teams were able to score on the pick and roll because he was slow to recover, and they were able to hit those angles on those passes and get easy baskets. Definitely somebody that exploded onto the scene in the past year or so, and was the key player for Germany in that in their run at the FIBA U19 World Cup. Would really excited to see him at Washington. Do I see him as the top international prospect coming into the NCAA, as some people are saying? I don't.
Okay.
But I think the productivity has been there for him at the pro level and at the Youth Eurobasket and at the U19 World Cup levels. And so that productivity, I think, tends to translate pretty often than players who maybe play lower levels of competition or not play at all. He played like 800 minutes this year just in the German league. He played 41 games at 21 minutes per game. So and then he also played a bit of he went to the third division where Würzburg has their like academy team, and he averaged like 25 and 13.
It was just silly.
took him to school.
Yeah. It was like I'm not coming back here.
Like why am I here?
Why am I here? So he played 64 games throughout the year. So it's probably the guy that's coming in with the most like high level experience of this bunch coming to college. And I think those two things, like the high level experience and the productivity, makes me think that it should translate pretty quickly. I just wonder, like, beyond the touch around the basket, what's the other like NBA skill? Do you think he's that's the question. Do you think he's an NBA rim protector? Do you think that the passing flashes that he can show here and there moving the ball makes you think that you could potentially run some plays through him on offense? Do you think he can be like an NBA stretch five? Those are kind of the questions that I'm trying to wrap my head around, but we have an entire year for him to answer those questions.
Yeah, and Jam, I'll turn this over to you with this thought. It kind of reminds me of the conversation that Goga Batadze had coming into the league a little bit too, where it's like a lot of tools, good size, pretty productive in some areas and things like that. But what does it look like when it fully fleshes out? And it took Goga actually, leaving the Pacers, right? Mm-hmm. And then going to Orlando to really find himself as like a really valuable kind of like high end third big to kind of like average second big. So I think that there's a little bit of that in there. But what are your kind of expectations, Jam? Because I watched this guy, and I'll be honest, I'm not as high as like some of his biggest fans are of his game.
Yeah, I do like him as a first rounder. As far as that lottery or top 20, I can't get there just quite yet. Was super impressed with him all throughout U19s. Like he just essentially just dominated. It was just 17 points, 13 rebounds, 1.9 assists per game. And I'm just a little bit skeptical. I love the touch, but just the shooting combined with the fact, well, first of all, with the shooting, the touch is great, but it's a kind of a catapult shot. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to straighten that out, but as long as he can hit it, for me, I don't care really what it looks like, as long as the production is there. Like, I was all in on Halliburton shooting. I was all in on Lonzo shooting. I think Lonzo was more about confidence than his actual form, and still maybe to clean some things up, but that's another story for a different day. But yeah, so just the shooting, I do want to see that. And then I want to see what he measures out to be. Obviously, length can be a compensator if he has that 7'1", 7'2" wingspan. But I've seen him listed anywhere from 6'8" to 6'11". So I'm not quite sure where he's going to stand on that. On the FIBA U19 website, he was at 6'8", 220. And then on the actual FIBA site, I believe he's at 6'10" or something like that. So it's kind of discrepancy. And especially for someone who's going to be possibly a little bit of an undersized center who is not the most explosive vertically. He's just a really strange player for me because you were saying just how efficient he is around the rim finishing. But what does that play finishing look like once you get to the NBA level? Because he's not exactly a lob threat. What does it look like when he has to finish against the NBA trees and be a little more creative over top or through? So, what is that, more of a push shot stuffy, more short roll? So those things that he does well now and he's shown, I want to see how he can continue to make that translate and compensate for different things. And then one thing I do want to touch with him, man, that guy rebounds. I know rebounds is not the sexiest thing, but I love me a rebounder. When you can end possessions and create extra possessions like he does, that's just an unbelievable skill. He rebounds in and out of his area, really good hands. So I think he's going to be a consistent double-double threat for Washington. And as we've seen, rebounding continues to translate level after level after level. So I do think that's going to be something he has to hang his hat on, possibly as a bench guy, and for me, unless the stretch side really plays out, or if there's more, like Ignacio was saying, with the passing, or if there's some DHO stuff, or it was a little bit more of a rim protector. But I can't quite get there with him as a rim protector, and I'm a little curious to see where he eventually plays on the NBA level. If he's defending fives, is it four? Because he's not an anchor big. So I think there's just still a lot of questions, but there's some fun tools to work with.
No doubt. And I think, too, like what we've seen from guys like, Domas Sabonis, Alperen Şengün, they kind of break the mold of what we typically look for with big men, but it takes the right kind of roster construction for those kind of unorthodox bigs to really pan out. But we're going to wrap up there with Hans Steinbach. We're going to take our last break, and we got 3 more prospects that we're going to rip through. Once we come back, we're going to talk about some guys playing down under, so hang tight. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back here to the show. We are continuing with our breakdown of the top international prospects with our guy Ignacio here, our No Ceilings brethren here. So, Ignacio, we're going to transition now to a guy who recently just played his very first game in the NBL. We're going to be talking about Karim Lopez playing for the New Zealand, or correction, I said
New Zealand. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
We're not a sponsor. Could be.
Yeah,
could be the New Zealand / No Ceiling Breakers, the wing forward, 6'8" listed, 231 pounds, very specific weight there, and will be 19 years old come this next NBA season. His last season stats, he averaged about 10 points per game, almost 5 boards, over 1 assist, over half a steal, and almost 1 full block with splits of 46, 31, 74. Ignacio, I'm going to turn this guy over to you. But first, before I do, the biggest thing that stood out to me on my film dive with him is like he's listed really tall. And I know some people who have actually like laid eyes on him in person. Nathan Grubel, Draft Deeper here at No Ceilings being one of them, says he's every bit of it. But when I watch him play, I don't know what it is. It's like some trick photography. It feels like he plays like he's 6'6", 6'5" almost. And his athleticism kind of snuck up on me when I was watching his film. What's your just overall experience in watching Karim?
For me, it was really interesting to see him go that route. Lopez is likely the best prospect to ever come out of Mexico. Certainly the best prospect in the last decade and a half. And for me, it was really interesting to see the whole transition from him standing out in those Mexican U16, U18 FIBA teams, go to Juventus in Spain, just absolutely be the best prospect in that team, and then go to the NBL to where he's in his second year right now. And for me, the biggest thing that stood out is, like you mentioned, not only the athleticism, but I saw him initially like every teenager, especially lanky, tall teenagers. He was super skinny and could like struggle to like, against contact to keep the dribble alive against,
especially
like,
in the NBL. It's a very physical league.
Yeah. And then I just saw him take this leap in terms of strength, and he's like, he loves contact.
Yes.
And that's one green flag about any player. Like, when they go to the rim and they seek contact, they seek like fouls, and they learn to play through that. That's, for me, is super interesting. For me, from every report that I have, he's every bit of 6'8". I think he moves like a wing. He's quicker than you would expect a 6'8" guy with that size, with that physicality. But like, he moves really well, and obviously when he has a runway, he can like really get up for dunks. But like, not somebody that has like a 1% level of athleticism.
Not a twitchy guy at all. Yeah,
exactly. But like, when he comes out, when he can turn the corner and have 1 or 2 steps towards the rim, he will dunk it, or he will finish it, because he can generate that much power, on his drives and on his cuts. So that's something that I loved about him. The question has always been his shot. He was at one point last year, he was at 17%, and then he kind of rallied through to the end of the year. He ended up at 30% from 3, 74% from the line between the preseason and the proper NBL season. And I think this year will be really interesting. Last year, he played on a more like contained off-ball role. We explained why with Sarr and a bunch of the other guys, which is like, he's playing on a really talented team. He's going to be the 5th best offensive player on that team. This year, it's going to be really interesting. He scored 14 points today in a matchup against Dash Daniels, 14 points, 6 rebounds. He has made, I think, 2 for 4 from 3-point range so far.
Hang it up. You're good. You're good. Don't do anything else. You got the efficiency you're looking for, dude.
But I think, like, and this is especially true for players in their first year in a new setting, in a new context. The shot is the thing that takes the longest to come around.
Yep.
Because you have to adjust to the speed of the game, to the type of opportunities you get, to the type of defenders you're facing, and to the scheme of your team. And so if you were to tell me that a 17-year-old Karim Lopez would have shot 30% from 3 on 2.5 attempts last year, I would have said, great, absolutely great. So that's the question for me. For me, with the movement skills, the physicality, the size, the defense, we didn't even get to the defense. For me, like, that's a guy that consistently makes an impact on multiple levels of the floor. I love how he can rotate, block shots from the weak side. You kind of see why I always love the guys that, even though they have perimeter skills, they were always used to being the tallest guy on their team, because they learn quickly to, I got to rotate and block the shot. They always have to be on the lookout to what happens on the rim. And so that he's a guy that can certainly do that. Last year, playing 21 minutes, almost 1 block per game. He has 2 blocks over 2 games in the current season. So that two-way impact, that athleticism, that size, if the shot comes around, last year when I wrote about him, I said he's a top 12 draft pick in an average draft. I maintain it, and if he shots the ball well, I think he's top 10, top 8 in any draft, really.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And Jam, what's crazy about Kareem to me is, like, he still, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but he still feels kind of doughy. Like he's not like NBA level strength conditioning training yet. You know what I mean? Like if I'm an NBA team and I see where he is athletically right now with just the way that he aesthetically looks, I'm excited to get him into my facilities and start hitting him with the right nutrition, start hitting him with the strength and conditioning, because he's already getting like the Carmelo shoulder into guys, like when he's driving and creating separation, and he'll just lay it up over the top of them, like with these little like finger rolls. And it's like, how are you creating this much separation while not being the most twitchy, explosive guy? But it all just comes down to strength, Jam.
Yeah, just that combination of strength and fluidity that he has and the motor that he plays with. He's going to give you that in the offensive and hitting the offensive glass, and he's going to do it defensively with defensive playmaking. I don't want to continue to go like international comparisons, but just
let's do it. Let's be lazy, dude. Come on, it's all right.
Some of the profile stuff reminds me a little bit of Hugo Gonzalez when you talk about someone who it has this motor defensively, the tools defensively, a little raw offensively with shooting questions, but does like to get downhill, will hit the offensive glass, play in transition, and do those things. Obviously, as taller than Hugo as well. So just a little profile-wise, it reminds me a little bit of that. I'm just curious to see what the shot continues to do, and it's a little army, if that makes sense. Like on the release, a little elongated sometimes on the shot for me, but I think that's something that can be smoothed out. I'm really excited about what he can do as a play finisher, just stuff that when he doesn't need the ball, how he can impact the game as well and be that defensive playmaker. Want to see really how many different positions he can defend. If there's someone you can go and put him at the point of attack, if he can defend some point guards and do some things, maybe 1 through 4, I think that'll be very, very intriguing. So this is going to be a really fun year for him in a new role to be able to explore and really do some more things too. And he could honestly really be in that top 10 at the end of the day when you talk about the two-way impact and hopefully the projectable shooting as well.
Yeah, Denny Avia was top 10 too, wasn't he? I mean, kind of do it all, powerful build type of a dude coming into the league. So might be a little bit of that in there too. But let's transition now from one NBL next star to another. Ignacio, you dropped the name. Younger brother of Dyson Daniels, Dash Daniels, playing for Melbourne United this year. Another one of these guys that I have listed as a perimeter player, a 6'5", 198 pounds, will be 18 years old coming to next year. So NBA teams look at that in the developmental curve. They got to be kind of like chomping at the bit to at least get a close look at this kid, right? Last season averaged 5.5 points per game, 1.5 rebounds, that's what his numbers are this year. Last I looked, 5.5 points per game, 1.5 rebounds, half of assist, half a steal, with shooting splits of 63, 50, and 0 is what I have for free throws. I don't know if he attempted one or not, but so far the efficiency from the field and from the three-point line are what you're wanting to see, Ignacio. And I know that the shooting touch is kind of one of the things that's like the name of the game in the development of Dash Daniels.
Yeah. The first time, and this is going back a bit into what my process is, Australia plays the Oceania region when it comes to like U16, U18 tournaments. They play the Oceania region, then they qualify for the Asian Cup. There's only one game worth anything in terms of scouting from those Oceania tournaments, and it's the game against New Zealand. You can literally go out there and see the scoring differences when Australia plays. Not gonna name the nations because I
insert other. Yeah.
Gotcha. And it's like 100 points per game of differential easily. So I watched him the first time. I watched him in that tournament playing against New Zealand, and when I go into those tournaments, I always go with a blank page and I just take notes depending on the number of the jersey, because I don't want anything outside of that, like the ranking.
Your judgment, yeah.
Yeah, I don't want go confirmation bias or I don't want to say, oh, let's see what he's all about. And so I take notes of this guy who's clearly way better than I expected for a 14-year-old. Like, he's shooting 40% from three. He's playing defense out of his mind. He's making plays for teammates. He's finishing strong at the rim. He has the size. And of course, when I'm putting my notes in my database, I see that he's Dyson Daniels' brother. And then I start to make the connection. Yeah. And I was super excited because when he was 14, 15, he was way more developed and, or let's say, at a better stage of development than Dyson was back in the day. He was 6'3" when I watched him. He's 6'5" now, and like it happens with many prospects since then, I think that the growth spurt has affected a bit of the jumper and a bit of the touch. And so the past few years, in terms of like touch around the basket and touch as a jump shooter, hasn't been there for him, and that's the big question. This year at the U19 World Cup, he was, I would say, pretty inefficient, especially around the basket. He shot 28% from the field, and that's something that I think we should be looking at this season at the NBL. Okay, how he can finish at the rim, how he can create offense, and what's the offensive role for him.
Yeah,
at the next level. He has started the season really well. He had a 14-point game today. He actually played against Karim Lopez' team, so that was an interesting matchup. He had a 14-point game there. But my question with Dash is, what's going to be the offensive role that keeps him in the NBA? And defensively, like, it would be unfair to compare him with his brother, who has developed into one of the better defensive wings in the NBA, a guy that just is absolutely dominating at creating defensive events. But like, and Dash certainly has the tools, 6'5" with a 6'10" wingspan. But like, what's the role defensively? Is he gonna grow into a guy that can defend like 1 through 3? He's just gonna be like a perimeter defender, like that can defend guards. Are you going to be able to put your top guard? Are you going to be able to put him to defend the opposing team's top guard? And he's going to have a ton of that in Australia, because Australia is a league that has a ton of those like 5'11", 6 foot, like scoring guards. Like, so that's going to be a good test for him. If early season is an indication, Melbourne is giving him a ton of run. Yep. So that's pretty good. And also another thing that I wanted to bring up, he's going to be one of the youngest players in the draft. He has a December 18 birthday, which means that he's going to be 18 years old most of his draft year. So he's going to be one of the youngest players in the draft. He's 17. He's going to be 17 for, I think, a ton of the season in the NBL, for at least half a season. So definitely interested to see where he develops. The tools are there. It's interesting for me. He feels like a ball of clay, and it's going to be interesting to see, like, okay, does he develop to be like this, like secondary passer? Does he become a perimeter stopper, and the shot comes around and he's like this 3-and-D 2 guard? Like, a ton of stuff is like possible for him, and despite kind of underwhelming run at the U19 World Cup, I think on developing those NBA skills is still possible for him.
For sure. So Jam, I'm gonna turn this part over to you. I'm encouraged though right now just to kind of see how productive he is in the early onset of the NBL season, because I was looking at, whatever film we could even get, and we get access to some film that not everybody gets, and even the stuff that we get to look at, shout out our friends over at Synergy, still pretty limited on the stuff that we were able to see through that. But I was watching and I'm like, okay, the NBL is going to be a great test for him because they're going to really get to show off like how contact adverse he may or may not be. I'm encouraged to see, like, right off the jump, though, that he is taking to that more physical style of play a little bit more quickly than I thought he was going to.
Yeah, that's very important. And it's going to, like Ignacio said, he's going to have a really important and consistent role with New Zealand as well. And Ignacio, I think he put it nice when he said it was underwhelming, that U19. I know for me, like, I just really soured on him, and I'm doing my best not to hold it over his head. And I was so happy to see him come out strong in the NBL because it's like, all right, I can kind of early put that out of my mind. Some of those things, like you were saying, with the inefficiency around the field, especially at the rim as well, just how brutal that was, that's going to be a high concern. But at least that he's put some of that in the rear view. Maybe he's not thinking about that as much as me and other scouts are in that type of performance. Because coming out of that, I was just like, lottery top 20? Like, are you kidding? Like, first round, maybe, but the tools are still there. It'll be up to see if he can develop that shot, will he get it back to form, at least a passable form where he can be a 3-and-D type of guy, and what type of defender is he really going to be. You don't want to consistently give him that comparison to his brother, which is going to always happen, of course. You know how we always get that, where it's the Jones brothers or the Curry's, whatever the situation is.
Cody Williams.
Yeah, that's a very good one right there. So maybe he does get a boost, similar how Cody did. Because of Jalen. So I'm very interested to see how things do play out for him. He's so far the path seems is going to be there for him to do anything he really wants to raise that draft stock and have the opportunity to play with the ball in his hands, do some stuff off the ball too. So he's going to be one to watch all season long. And I think he's going to be poised for a major bounce back from what he showed in U19s.
For sure. All right, so guys, we're going to wrap up the Dash Daniels conversation there. Transition to our last prospect that we're going to be talking about. In Ignacio, I really liked this guy last year. I had him considerably high in my rankings last year, understanding that it was probably going to be highly unlikely that he would go to the NBA draft and be like a undrafted free agent, like target for an NBA team. But I really enjoyed Johann Grunloh, who will be playing at Virginia this year. Big man, listed at 7 feet. From the last listing that I had in my database to what Virginia has him listed at now, it looks like he's gained weight. He's listed at 238 pounds. Very encouraging. Going to be one of the older of the guys that we're going to be talking about now. Will be 21 come his first NBA season. Last year, though, averaged 8 points per game, over 5 boards, almost 1 assist, over 1.5 blocks per game, half the steal, with shooting splits of 46, 34, 73. Ignacio, really like Grunloh. I think that he kind of profiles similarly to what people were talking about with Steinbach as potentially a stretch big. I think that the trajectory for him, the path for Grunloh to be able to do that, is a little bit more clear. But what do you think about Johann? And again, of course, whatever background you could provide is obviously appreciated, brother.
So Grunloh, one of the most experienced players, I think, coming into the NCAA this season. One of the most experienced players that within his age range, he's still a young player, still 20 years old right now, but has nearly 100 games of experience in the top league of Germany between the German Bundesliga and the Basketball Champions League, which is one of the continental competitions there. And he was, I think, 2 years ago, where he was draft eligible for the first time, there were some conversations of like, this guy is really productive. Ultimately, he goes back to Rasta in Germany. And the second season, I think one of the things that happened with Grunloh last year is that we didn't have a ton of, we expected him after a first like great season for Rasta, after a first season where he was named German Player of the Year. He was really productive for his age. We were expecting him to take the next step. And that, besides the three-point shooting, which he became a credible threat as a three-point shooter, I don't think the next step really happened in terms of productivity. And that's ultimately why he ends up not going to the draft and end up going to the NCAA route. For me, you hit it, because the sales pitch for him is a 7-footer who can shoot threes and finish players around the basket. And so you have a guy that I don't think he's going to create as much with the ball in his hands. And comparing him to the other German 7-footer that we talked about today in Steinbach, I don't think he has that like elite touch around the basket where you can ask him to like, oh, he's going to create or solve like difficult situations around the basket. But he's a pretty solid finisher, like in pick and rolls, if he gets the ball in the dunker spot as well. And I trust him more than I trust Steinbach as a three-point shooter. So definitely Grunloh, for me, going again with the Euro-on-Euro comparisons, kind of reminds me of Quinton Post. Like, and they are also listed same size, same weight, which is kind of gives you an idea on how he would look at an NBA floor. And for me, Post coming out of Boston College, and you guys probably watched him more just because you guys watch more college than I do. But the selling point with Post was 7-footer who can shoot and finish around the basket.
A little bit of handle too, a little bit of dribble.
Yeah, and I think Grunloh has shown a bit of that. I wouldn't like him to like be putting the ball on the floor and like driving it, at least his first year in college. But like he's fluid enough to like do a dribble handoff, maybe attack a closeout.
2 dribbles and make a decision. That's kind of like the
Exactly. And but I think ultimately what Post proved this year with Golden State, he initially came up on a 2-way contract, ended up being converted to a standard contract before the end of the season, is that there's value in that 7-footer who can hit threes. Even if like being, people don't use the stretch word anymore before a position because most guys are expected to shoot. But like Grunloh has elite size, and I think he can become a reliable shooter. I think he is right now, and I think that's what's going to be his calling card from day one at the NCAA level. I think defensively, like again, from those 7-footers, I would like to see a bit more production. He did block 1.6 shots per game last year in Germany. Can he be this guy? And I think he certainly has the mobility, certainly has the wingspan. Does he have it in him to become like this 2 block per game guy at the college level? Because I think that would make him way more valuable than somebody who can like contest shots but is not necessarily a rim protector, if that makes any sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And I like the defensive flashes that I've seen from him too. Like again, I had him really high. He was in my top 100. I think I even had him top 80 if I remember looking at it. A really big proponent of what Grunloh brought to the table last year. Jam, UVA.
Wahoo!
Let's go. What are we thinking about Grunloh coming in, man?
Yeah, I'm very excited to see him, and then hearing both you talk about him as well. Like I can't wait to get down several times to Charlottesville and watch him play. The sales point is simple, as Ignacio was saying. And once again, he is a stretch big that can block shots, and that's exactly what you really want from your big man, especially in the modern game. He's not that true rim protector. He's mostly blocking shots because he's fairly fluid and he's tall, but he's not that guy's going to be menacing, rotating over, swatting shots, really deterring guys from going to the rim and look at the finish. That's not really his game. He's not that type of twitchy vertical pop type of athlete, just more of long and with the size as well too. So for me, it's going to be about how consistent is he going to continue to shoot the rock. He shot at 33.3% according to Synergy on his catch and shoot threes. That's on 87 attempts. And one thing that I really like seeing from that profile, his shooting profile as well, is on guarded catch and shoot 3-pointers. He shot 45.7%, and that's on 46 attempts. So if he's open and you leave him wide open, he's knocking them down. And it's someone that can attack, close out, has, as you were saying, Steven, the ability to go and make a dribble or two and make a decision. So I'm really excited to see what it's going to look like for him. I don't think he's a this year guy, probably 2, maybe 3 years, especially as he continues to add strength. And then hopefully his role grows year in, year out at UVA. I think he could be in line to start the year. Maybe it'll be mid or maybe to the end of the season. But I think he will have a good chance to play a good amount of minutes and possibly even start. So we should see him early and often.
I can't wait to see him, man. I'm a big fan. But fellas, that's going to wrap it up on our discussion. Ignacio, brother, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. We gotta do this more often, man. It was awesome.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Oh, dude, easy day. Before we let you out of here, man, we want to give you an opportunity to share any future work. I know that you said that you were doing some stuff behind the scenes here for No Ceilings as we're preparing for our grand opening for this year. What do you got going on behind the scenes, brother?
Yeah, so I don't know if I don't have a release date on these things because I kind of work. I also I'm working. Next year is going to be my second year working for Capitanes of Mexico City in the G League in their scouting department. So really excited about that.
Oh, yeah.
And so that between that and working for FIBA kind of takes away a bit of my time. But working on 2 pieces right now, I kind of wanted to. The first one, I've been studying the correlation between, and this is a lot of tables and a lot of charts, but I've been studying
stuff
the correlation.
Us nerds love, yeah.
Studying the correlation between the amount of minutes or the percentage of minutes you give to transfers, returning players, and freshmen, and lower division transfers, or like JUCO Division 2. The correlation between that and winning at the NCAA level. To kind of confirm or debunk the myth of that you cannot win with freshmen and that, getting transfers is better. From my early estimations, the only correlation between winning and something is the most returners that you can get, the most guys that you already have in your program. If you can give more minutes to those guys, correlates more to winning. I'll try to develop it more. I had a whole paragraph written about Dabo Swinney at Clemson and how he was able to bring guys every year. And I wrote that paragraph before the season. And I, of course, have to change that because we don't know if he's going to be at Clemson by the time I finish the piece. The second piece, I'm trying to do kind of a big preseason thing with all the international guys, or getting to as many international guys going to the NCAA as I can, because certainly it's going to be a more interesting year for international guys in college than those outside of college. We didn't even get to guys like Omer Meyer, who's going to Purdue, one of the better shot creators, I think, coming out of the international ranks. We didn't get to David Mirkovic at Illinois, great multi-level scorer at 6'9". C.D. Gay for Arizona, coming out of Senegal, one of the high upside guys in the draft, just because of movement skills and tools at his size and defensive potential. Ivan Karchenkov at Arizona, even guys in the lower levels of NCAA. One of the guys that I want to point out is Lucas Marí out of Spain. He's going to Vermont this year. And the moment he committed, I got a text from somebody in the college rank, and the text was like, what the it was like, if I knew we had a shot, we would have got him.
Yeah.
But that's, and I think that's, again, with all the guys committing to like high level programs, I think a bit of the beauty of international recruiting is getting lost, where you had teams like, you could get a lot of value that teams usually didn't get. Like, for instance, Santi Aldama. I think it's the perfect case where he goes,
my neck of the woods,
where he goes to that program, and he also kind of goes there a bit of like, because they had a Spanish assistant coach. I think they also had Golden DK, who seemed to be like, DK seemed to be like the prize from that class. And of course, Aldama ends up exploded that year at FIBA, and then ends up exploded at Loyola. A bit of that is getting lost, because now high major teams are getting more and more into international recruiting, but it also leaves you a small space for small schools to get more value than they would get recruiting nationally. So I guess that's a bit of the beauty of international recruiting.
Yeah. It's all give and take, man. That's all sports is. No matter where we are in the cycle, there's just give and take. It's never all of one thing, and I love that. Jim, what about you, brother? I know that you just dropped a Magoon Guath piece. Do you have anything else going on behind the scenes right now, or are you still kind of in the brainstorming phase?
Yeah, right now I'm working on the Caden Lewis piece that's kind of percolating. He's going to have a wonderful opportunity at Villanova to lead the show, make mistakes, and grow. So he's an underrated guy, the freshman that I do like. So we'll have something. Hopefully I'll get that done this week for next week.
Right on. And as for myself, I got a piece that's supposed to be dropping in the middle of this upcoming week. I'm very excited. It's going to be a more like themed fun piece. It's going to be set up kind of like a streaming service, but it's going to serve as like draft primer for this upcoming class, and a little bit of trends based off of the last few drafts of like positions, international, freshmen and stuff like that. So a very fun piece, and I can't wait for that to drop. But for No Ceilings, on the Locked On NBA Draft podcast with No Ceilings, this next week on Monday, Rucker and Metcalf are going to be discussing London Jemison. I'm very excited about that. On Tuesday, Nathan and Maxwell are going to discuss how to scout forwards in the 2026 class. On Wednesday, Corey and Albert having Omer Meyer scout. We just talked about him. Thursday, Rucker and Metcalf are going to have a Dwayne Aristode scout. I'm very excited for that one. He is very high on my soon-to-watch list. And then Friday, Corey and Albert, we're going to have a Dame Sarr scout to kind of companion with what you just heard today. Yeah. And then on the YouTube and podcast feed on Wednesday, Corey and Albert are going to have a piece on blue chips and penny stocks. So the draft guys, the DRFT guys are back. And then Friday, Rucker and Metcalf are going to discuss NBA breakout candidates. That's going to be fun. For us, our next show is scheduled to be our favorite sleeper prospects. Jam and I have a little bit of work to do, because this upcoming weekend, I'm going to be at the Hoop Exchange Fall Festival near Orlando. I'm very excited to be a part of that. And our next show, we're going to have to be a little bit creative on what we want to do when we want to do it, but we will drop that information as soon as we can. But for our excellent guest here, Ignacio Rissotto, for my co-host, Jam Hines, for the rest of us at No Ceilings, we are the Draft Sickos, and we will catch up with y'all next time. Much love, y'all.